Hi guys, it's me Ari from Ari's Guitar Lessons. As you already know, this video is part of an ongoing series on music theory in which we are discussing chords and chord construction, right? So in this particular video, we'll be discussing a lot of really interesting things about the suspended chords. So things like what are the different kinds of suspended chords, why are they called suspended, what is the theory behind them, and I can guarantee that there's going to be a certain amount of information that you will get in this video which is not available online, or maybe it's very rare, but there's going to be some really nice aha moments in this video for you. Okay, so now this video happens to be part 2. You know, there's a video that I made earlier, and in that video we touched upon the basic music theory concepts like note theory. Then we also discussed intervals, and using these two we arrived at the whole concept behind triads. You know, so basically we discussed major chords, minor chords, diminished chords and augmented chords in the previous video. So in case you haven't seen that video, my request is to check that video out first, because there'll be a lot of elements which might get repeated here and you might not really have an understanding of those elements. So see that video first, right? Yeah, and if you have already seen that, so we'll continue. So in the previous video I told you that triads, for any chord to be classified as a triad, there are two conditions that need to get met, right? So let's just start off with that. So triads, there were two conditions. The first condition was that there need to be 3 notes, and the second condition was that they need to be stacked in thirds. And then we also looked at the different kinds of triads. So we saw that there are 4 main triads: the major chord, minor chord, the augmented chord, and there's a diminished as well, right? And if we were to just study these 4 chords, a major chord has 3 notes, the root also represented by 1. Then there's a major third interval which can be written as a 3, and there's a perfect fifth interval which can be written as a 5. Or, you know, so these are intervals from the root. What we saw in the previous video is that we can also look at the intervals between these notes, and there happens to be a major third interval followed by a minor third interval. So there are 2 intervals in this chord, a major chord, a major third and a minor third. Similarly, in the case of a minor chord, what we saw was that there's a root, there's a perfect fifth, and there is a minor third interval which can also be written as a flat 3. You know, minor third means 1 note flat, 1 note to the left of 3. In terms of intervals or stacking, we can say that it's got a minor third interval followed by a major third interval. Once again, we've discussed all of this in the previous video. The augmented chord similarly has got a root note, a major third, and an augmented fifth interval, also written as a sharp 5. And in terms of the stacking, it's got a major third and another major third stacked. And a diminished chord has a root, it's got a minor third interval written as a flat 3, and a diminished fifth interval also written as a flat 5. Or in terms of the stackings, it's got a minor third interval followed by another minor third interval stacked on it. So we can clearly see that all these 4 chords have 3 notes each, and they are all stacked in thirds: major third, minor third, minor third, major third, major third, major third, minor third, minor third. Alright, so this is why these triads are called triads. These chords are called triads because they meet these 2 conditions: 3 notes stacked in 3s. Now, suspended chords are very interesting because they actually meet just one of these conditions. And that is also the reason why a lot of people are confused whether suspended chords are triads or not. Now, they satisfy one of those conditions, which is this one, that there are 3 notes in these suspended chords, but they do not satisfy the second condition, which is that they need to be stacked in thirds. Okay, so we'll just come to that concept now. Alright, so let me just delete these 2 at the moment. So we'll start off with the suspended chords. Now, whenever you say a suspended chord, it always refers to a suspended 4th chord. Now, suspended chord, you know, there can be different kinds of suspended chords, but the most popular ones happen to be 2. So there is a suspended 4th chord and there is a suspended 2nd chord. But whenever you hear the word suspended, so if somebody says, okay, can you play me a G suspended? So he or she is referring to a suspended 4th. So if you hear just the word suspended, it means suspended fourth. If you hear the word suspended second, then you need to play the second kind of a suspended, which is the sus2 chord. Okay. There are of course other suspended chords as well. In jazz music, we have the dominant 7 suspended fourth, and a lot of other suspended chords, very nice, fancy versions. But the most common ones happen to be these two: suspended fourth and suspended second. And if somebody says suspended, he or she is referring to a suspended fourth. Okay. Now I'll tell you what exactly are these suspended 2 and 4 chords. Now we saw that in the case of a major chord, we have the first, the third, and the fifth. Yeah. In the minor chord, we have a first, flat third, and the fifth. In the case of a suspended fourth chord, you play a first, a perfect fourth, and the perfect fifth. So a 1, 4, 5. In the case of a suspended chord, you can guess. One suspended 4 was 1, 4, 5. Suspended second is a 1, 2, and a 5. So root, perfect fourth, perfect fifth. Root, perfect fourth, perfect fifth. Root, major second, and perfect fifth. Okay, so this is why a suspended fourth chord is called a fourth, because it's got a fourth in it. Suspended second has a 2, so it's got a second in it, right? Yeah, so that's the reason why they call it fourth and 2. I'll come to the suspended chords, suspended bit in some time. But you know the interesting thing, I'm not sure if you've heard this, but it's a very popular saying that major chords are very happy and minor chords are very sad. It's, you know, people generally believe that. But if you were to study the major and minor chords, you will see that they have 3 notes, right? And 2 out of those 3 notes happen to be the same. So both the major and minor have the first and the fifth in them. The only differentiating note happens to be the third. In the case of a major chord, we have a major third. In the minor chord, we have a minor third. So this whole characteristic of happiness and sadness, happiness being associated with major chord, sadness being associated with a minor chord, can be attributed to just one single note, which is this third interval. Right? So it's safe to say that the major third is a happy note, happy interval, and minor third is a sad interval. In the case of a suspended chord, however, we do not see any major or minor interval, which is why both these suspended chords, you cannot really say that it's got a happy sound or it's got a sad sound. So you can actually use these in either instance. If you want to make a happy song, you can use a suspended chord. If you want to make a sad song, you can still use a suspended chord, right? Because they don't really have the third element in it. Okay. So yeah, but a lot of people. So you can see that, you know, these chords are stacked in. Sorry, these chords have 3 notes, but they're not stacked in thirds. A lot of people are of the opinion that a 1, 4, 5. So this is actually a perfect fourth interval, and a 4, 5. That's one whole step. So that's a major second interval. Similarly, a suspended 2 chord has a major second interval, and from a 2 to a 5, that's a perfect fourth interval, or 2 whole steps and 1 whole step. So versus the triads, which had thirds stacked, these have a random stacking. So this is a fourth stacking and this is a second stacking. Similarly, a suspended 2 has a second stacking and a fourth stacking. So a lot of people have this notion that suspended chords have random stacking. So a lot of people actually call suspended chords as randomly stacked triads. But these aren't really random, and there's a very nicer way to look at these suspended chords, which I'll come to later. But you know, so we just park it for later. But right now what we've understood is why the suspended chords have this. We've understood the number. The number represents the second note. So suspended fourth has a fourth in it. A suspended second has a second in it. We've also seen that these chords do not have a third in it, which is why they don't have a clear major or a minor sound. Okay? Or a clear happy or a sad sound. Okay. Now I just want to talk about. So this is understood. Now let's come to a very interesting thing. Okay, let me just erase this part. Suspended fourth and suspended 2 chords have this really interesting relationship between them. Now for that, in order to illustrate that relation, let me just give you an example. Let's take a C suspended fourth chord, for example. Okay, a C sus 4 needs to have a first, fourth, and fifth. So let me just write down all the 12 notes for you. So there's a C, C sharp. We're talking only sharps right now. C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and a C. So these are all the 12 notes. Okay. Now we want to plot, let's say, a C sus4 chord, a C sus4, which will have the first, the fourth, and the fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So basically I've just written down all the intervals. So C sus4 will have the root, which is a C. It will have the fifth, which is a G, and it will have the fourth, which is 2 whole steps and 1 half step, which is the F. So a C sus4 basically has a C, an F, and a G. Okay. Now the interesting thing is that if I were to, let's say, plot an F sus2 example, if I want to plot an F sus2, an F sus2 will again have the first, it will have the second, and the fifth. So F sus2, what is the root for an F sus2? It's an F. Okay, 1, 2, and 5, right? Which is the fifth note from an F. Perfect fifth is 3 whole steps and 1 half step. So from an F to a G, 1 whole step, G to an A, second whole step, A to an B, third whole step, and a half step is a C. So perfect fifth for an F is a C. And what is one major second from an F? 1 whole step. So F to a G, that's one major second. This happens to be a G. Okay. So what we see is that a C sus4 has 3 notes, C, F, and a G. And F sus2 has 3 notes, F, G, and a C. Now the interesting thing is that both the chords actually have the same notes. Yeah? So can you see that? A C sus4 has a C, F, G, and an F sus2 has an F, G, and C. So in other words, what we can conclude from this thing is that a note and a sus4. So any sus4 chord happens to have, so will have the same notes as the sus2 version of its perfect fourth. Now C to an F is a perfect fourth. So any note, take any note, plot its suspended fourth chord, it will have the same notes as the suspended second version of its perfect fourth. So C sus4 will have the same notes as the suspended second of its perfect fourth. So perfect fourth of C is F. Right? Now this actually is a different concept. There's a concept called inversions. We'll get to that concept later. This is actually an inversion, but I don't want to confuse you unnecessarily. So just think in terms of notes, you know. So yes, it's an inversion, but let's just think notes. Both the C sus4 and F sus2 have the same notes, C, F, G, F, G, and C. And the reverse is also true. So any suspended second chord happens to have the same notes, F and a C. So C happens to be the perfect fifth of an F. So any suspended second chord will have the same notes as the suspended fourth version of its perfect fifth interval. Did that make sense? C sus4 is the same as sus2 of an F, which is perfect fourth. F sus2 will have the same notes as the sus4 of a C, which is perfect fifth. Now here, I want you to do an exercise for me. So all the natural notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, 7 natural notes. I want you to write down the individual notes of the suspended second and suspended fourth version of all of these 7 notes. C sus2, D sus2, E sus2, F sus2, G sus2, A sus2, B sus2, C sus4, B sus4, C, and so on, you know. So I want you to plot those using the same exercise. So just watch this video again. How exactly did I plot this? So I want you to do that exercise, and then you'll see for yourself that suspended fourth has the same notes as a suspended second of a different chord, right? So in a certain way, these suspended chords are very similar. Why do I keep dropping everything? Anyways, so yeah, a suspended second and a suspended fourth chords, these are very similar chords, alright? So that's part 1. So anyways, in this segment, what we've understood is the theory behind at least the second and the fourth bit, and we've seen that both the suspended second and suspended fourth chords do not really have a major or a minor flavor in them, and of course the fact that both of them happen to be very similar, so they have similar notes. Now we'll come to the second segment in which we'll discuss why are the suspended chords called suspended and how exactly do we use them, right? So a lot of interesting stuff. Okay, so in music, what is music? Music is nothing but series of tension and resolutions. You know, so there are actually three things. There are three stages that are often talked about in music. So these three happen to be preparation, or it can also be called anticipation. Then there is tension, and there is resolution. You know, so just to give you an example, if I were to just so you heard of a major scale, right? So let me just hum a major scale for you. I'll hum it for you. It's a very popular thing. Let's say I do this. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So that's your major scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Na 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 na. Right? Now let's say that, you know, I just meet you randomly and I say, okay, hear me out. Na 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 na. And then I stop here. So immediately there's a little bit of tension, you know, because you want me, your ear really wants me to sing out that last note, which is na. You know, so we actually want, so our ears are comfortable with certain progressions, and when we do not get what we want, there is a lot of tension in the air. So basically music is nothing but tension, and then you resolving it. So basically what I did was na 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 na. So I'm preparing you. Na 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 na. You're getting prepared. Okay. Anticipation. Na 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 na. Oh, there's a lot of tension. Na. Whew. It's resolved. Right? So basically that's what music is all about. You're creating tension and then you're resolving it, and that's what actually makes music very interesting, you know. And that is a trick which musicians use in their compositions just to add a lot of flavor. Okay. Now this tension, so in classical music theory, there is another concept which is called suspension, which is very similar to this. Now essentially what happens is, during voice leading, if you try to focus on a particular note, you play a chord which has that note, then you play another chord which also has that note, but the second chord creates a little bit of tension or a suspension, and then you resolve it. I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm playing an F major followed by a C major. Now this is a very popular chord progression. It's also called they actually say it's got a nice cadence. It's called a plagal cadence, but we'll come to that some other time. But this is a very popular progression, F to a C, right? Now, but since we're actually studying music theory, let's just look beyond just the chords. Let's try to understand why an F to a C sounds good. So in F major has three notes. Let me just plot it here. F major has a first, third, and fifth, which is an F, C, and second is an A. Sorry, the major third is an A. Okay? So F major is nothing but an F, A, and a C. So these three notes are played in the F major. Similarly, a C major is nothing but a C, E, and a G. So we're moving from a F, A, C to a C, E, G. Now, if I were to play, let's say, a C sus 4 in the middle, in between these two chords, a C sus 4 would be a C, an F, and a G. Right? So a C and 1 and 5th are common, and this third becomes a 4th. So this is a 4th, which is F. So let's say I play this progression, an F followed by a C sus 4 followed by a C. So what essentially is happening is that in this note, let's say my F note is the one that I'm trying to lay emphasis on the F note. Now I play an F major, then I played a C sus 4, which is a suspended, which is a different kind of a chord, but then it's got an F as well in it. So in a way, F is suspended from this chord to the other, and then suddenly I resolved it. So just understand one thing, that suspended chords actually resolve to the major chord. So a C sus 4 will want to resolve to a major or even a minor actually. And similarly a C sus 2 will also want to resolve to the natural major or a minor chord. Okay. So uh, what I did was, instead of an F and a C, I added a C sus4 in the middle, which, what happens because of that? I have an F in my F major, then I have an F in a suspended state in my C sus chord. So F is basically like a suspended state in these two notes, and then suddenly F is actually resolving to an E. So F was suspended in two chords, and then suddenly it got resolved. So I prepared, then I suspended, and then I resolved. So this is actually why, this is how suspended chords were actually used initially. Now suspended chords can be used in a lot of multiple ways, but just understand this. Let's take another example. If I were to play, let's say a G to a C. Oh no, not a G to a C. Let's say if I were to play, let's say a D minor to a C. In fact, a G to a C would be a very interesting combination as well. We'll come to that. We'll also discuss that. Okay, let's say I'm talking about a D minor to a C. Now, a D minor has these three notes: D, F, and A. So D, minor third, and a perfect fifth. C major, as we all know, has a C, E, and a G. Now, let's say I play a C sus 2. Okay, a C sus 2 would mean a C, a D, and a G. Yeah. So in a way, let's say I'm leading with a D. So if I'm trying to lay emphasis on a D, so I'm playing a D root in a D minor, then I play a C sus 2, which has a funny sounding D, or it has a D in it, and then suddenly I play a C major which resolves, wherein the D resolves. So you can say D resolves to an E, you can also say that a D resolves to a C. But the important thing is a D is resolving. So in this particular instance, what we see is that we prepared, and then we suspended the D through this chord, and then we resolved it. So this, my friends, was the reason why a suspended chord is called suspended, and how these chords were originally meant to be used. You play these chords as a kind of a suspension, because in these chords there is a note which was suspended from the previous chord. So you played a chord, then you suspended a note through the suspended chord, and then you suddenly resolved it. That was how suspended chord was originally meant to be used. But I just want you to know that the note that you're actually suspending does not always have to be with a root note. Like in the previous instance, we started off with an F, then we suspended the F through a C sus 4, right? But F, we played an F major which has an F in the root. Here, the suspended note D is again in the root of the first chord. It does not always need to be just the root note. It can also be a different note. So you remember, for example, I gave you the example of, I was talking about a G to a C. If you were to take this G to a C, a G major has G, B, and a D. I can also use, let's say, a D, and let's say I play a C sus 2. C, D, and a G, and a C, E, and a G. Here, I'm not really leading with a G. I can say that I'm using my D note from a G major, which is actually the perfect fifth interval. Then I can play a C sus 2, which also has a D in it, and then I'll resolve it to a C major. Okay, so did you understand what I'm saying? So you don't really, the leading note, or the note that the suspended note, so to speak, does not always have to be the root note of the first chord. It can be it can be a major third, minor third, or even a perfect fourth. Okay, so this is actually how suspended chords were originally meant to be used. So you play a chord, then you take one of those notes and you add a suspended which has that particular note, and then you suddenly resolve it. So that's how suspended chords were originally played. But in the current scenario, you can actually, you don't always need to use a suspended chord and resolve it to a major or a minor. You can just use a suspended chord for added color. Okay, so don't always need to resolve it. But this is why a suspended chord is called suspended, because there is a note which was present in a previous chord, and then you suspended it through that suspended chord, and then you suddenly resolved it to a major or a minor. Okay, so I hope that that actually clarifies uses of a suspended chord and why a sus2 or a sus4 is called so, Okay, so now that we've discussed this, okay, so one final thing that I just want to talk about in this particular video is that bit about the random stacking. So let's again take the example of a C major, or a C sus, let's say a C sus4, or C sus2 and a C sus4. C sus2 is a C, D and a G. C sus4 is a C, F and a G. Now this happens to be a major second interval and this is a perfect fourth interval. Similarly, this happens to be a perfect fourth interval and this is a major second interval. Now this is the reason why a lot of people call a sus2 and a sus4 as a randomly stacked chord, because this is a second interval, this is a fourth interval. Similarly, this is a fourth interval and this is a second interval. But actually, the sus2 and sus4 chords are not randomly stacked. They are actually, they sound very harmonious. And I'll show it to you. A C sus2 from a C to a D is a major second, from a C to a G is a perfect fourth. So this C to a G is a perfect fifth. Yeah. Now this interval is a perfect fifth. Yeah. Now instead of, so if you were to look at this D, then you're right in saying that this is a major second and this is a perfect fourth. However, if you were, so you remember after the C comes a C sharp and there's another D which comes after that. So these 12 notes keep going in circles. From a C to a G is a perfect fifth interval, but from a G to this D, this is one whole step, this is a second whole step, this is a third whole step and a half step. 3 whole steps and 1 half steps. So from a G to a D, this is also a perfect fifth interval. Okay, so a C, a D and a G is not, I mean, you might argue that the order is a C, D and a G. It's not exactly a C, G and a D. You're absolutely right. But the only point that I'm trying to make is a C sus2 is not technically a randomly stacked chord, because from a C to a G is a perfect fifth and from a G to a D is also a perfect fifth. So you can say is that a C sus2 is a kind of a triad, but it is stacked in fifths. I hope that made sense. C to a G is a fifth and G to a D is also a fifth. So it's not a randomly stacked chord, it's got fifths, it's stacked in fifths. Similarly, a C sus4. Now C sus4 is a little more interesting. From a C to an F is, let me use a different pen. From a C to an F is a perfect fourth interval. Yeah? You're right, F to a G is a major second. However, if you were to go backwards from a C, A sharp is one whole step, G sharp is another whole step, and 2.5 whole steps. 2.5 whole steps is perfect fourth. So from a C back to a G is actually a perfect fourth interval. So a C sus4, which is C, F and G, you can say that it's actually a C, F and a G. So this is a perfect fourth interval and this happens to be a perfect fourth interval as well. So if this is a C note, an F is a perfect fourth. Similarly, from a C, you go backwards, a perfect fourth interval, that's a G. So in a way, a C sus4 is also not randomly stacked, but it's like a triad. It's a 3-note chord which is stacked in fourths. Okay, so these suspended chords are technically not randomly stacked. They are also consistently stacked, if you want to put it that way. And that is also the reason why they sound harmonious, because perfect fourth and perfect fifth intervals are very, very harmonious. You know, there is this thing called overtone series, and I'll talk about those later. But in that we will see that there are certain intervals which actually sound very nice. And so anyways, let me just keep things very simple. Suspended second is not randomly stacked, and neither is a suspended fourth, because they actually have stackings of fifths and fourths. But you just need to look at them in a different way. Okay, so I really hope you enjoyed that lesson. What I want from you is to do a couple of things. First, like I shared with you, plot at least the natural notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Plot the suspended second chords of all these 7, as well as the suspended fourth chords of all of these 7 notes. That's exercise number 1. Second, I want you to see that there are certain suspended second chords which have the same notes as different suspended fourth chords, and what are the relations. So perfect fourth and perfect fifth. See those relationships as well. Then I want you to practice the progression thing that I told you about. So the voice leading, so you take a note and then you actually continue that note in a suspended chord and then you resolve it. So practice that in your progressions. Believe me, that is going to change the way you look at progressions. That's going to change your compositions as well, because this adding suspended chords in your ordinary chord progressions will actually make things sound a lot fresher and a lot more interesting. Alright, so just do these exercises. Believe me, you will love these chords. Okay, so I really hope you enjoyed that lesson. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. This is Adi, yeah, one more thing. If you understand Hindi, then I actually have a course on music theory called Practical Music Theory. The link is going to be in the description box, so you can purchase that course as well. It's a fantastic course, and yeah, it tells you a lot of interesting things about making music and composing stuff. Alright, so this is Adi and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Bye bye, take care.